No fusobacteria, diarrhea. Too much fusobacteria, raging diarrhea, and that's where she was. So she went from her first microbiome test, she was at 70, then she switched to Stella and Chewy's, which is 5% roughage, and there was some improvement. She went from 70 down to, I don't know, 50, 55, but she's still on the fire GI range because fusobacteria was being overnourished from an abundance of protein without enough prebiotic fiber to help balance that. So when we think about the Goldilocks principle, and when we think about how much fiber do we need to add, our dogs and cats are not cows. They don't need a whopper amount of prebiotic fiber, but they need enough to maintain a healthy GI tract.
All right. Well, that was a lot. This leads us to the F in life, and this comes to food diversity. How many of you buy from retailer, your pet food? So have you guys seen like all these type of labels on pet food today? It's like, can be super overwhelming. Now that we just talked about diversity and we learned that you need to diversify your foods, the problem is when pet parents go running into their local retailer, they're slapped in the face with this. And if the great Susan Thixton were here to tell you, she'd tell you it's all bullshit. Some of these terms don't even have legal definitions. Air dried, you'll see it on a lot of pet food bags. No legal definition, according to AFCO. It's just like a made-up term. And some manufacturers are using 3 or 4 terms when they go to sell their packaging to you, and you have no idea what you're looking at. But thank God this has all come to a final stop because of some great Brazilians who came up with a NOVA food classification system. Now, for the very first time, we've been able to define foods. And you guys have heard of these terms before. Minimally processed, processed, ultra processed. We use them all throughout the Forever Dog book. And what's great about this, here's a breakdown from the Washington Post, which I really love, because if you have the opportunity to read it, The Journey of Two Corns. Now, that people think that there's not much of a difference between processed and ultra processed, but look at the steps that the poor corn kernel has to go through to become a snack chip versus the other corn kernel destined for a can. Like, look at all the steps. The food matrix has to be absolutely obliterated in that corn in order to feed it through a dye and to get that wonderful chip shape, as you see. But look at the broken food matrix. Now it becomes less bioavailable. And oh boy, the good doctor is going to tell you all the good things that come along with it. But now we're able to classify pet foods. Now this is from the Heart and Stroke Foundation, but the definition comes from Harvard. Ultra-processed foods require machinery that we don't have in our kitchens. How many of you have heard of extruder? You guys are boxers. The kibble machine. I used to think way up here in the top, all the wonderful like ingredients like broccoli and carrots and everything will go in there and you get that magical golden cube that comes on the other side. That's how I thought it was. And then Susan Thixton, the Cape Crusaders, schooled me up here at the very top. This is actually lamb meal. I thought it was like fresh lamb. And this down here is all your vegetables. The foods go in ultra processed into the ultra processed machine. That's why Dr. Becker always says your food is ultra processed, because of all the steps it's going to take to get it to form into that beautiful little mold so it can be chopped up and ready to go. So that's why now in your books, when you open them up, we have this trusty little chart for you to kind of help you visually on what you're looking at when you're trying to determine in the pet space between minimally processed, processed, and ultra processed. So the canned corn and the carrot juice that you see falling into the processed category is totally different in the ultra processed category from delicious corn chips and delicious carrot cake. And if you compare it to pet food, well, that's like balanced homemade going in a minimally processed, commercial cooked that we see now available that's likely cooked as processed, and to get those beautiful golden shapes and colors, you have to obliterate the food matrix, making that bowl of Beneful ultra processed.
So for applying the NOVA food classification system to pet foods, it makes it really easy, and there's no arguing. We just don't even have to argue anymore. Minimally processed pet food is fresh raw ingredients that are slightly altered for the purpose of preservation. So that includes grinding, refrigerating, fermenting, freezing, freeze drying, dehydrating, vacuum packaging, and HPP. HPP is high pressure pasteurization. They hit the food with cold water at really high PSI and effectively obliterating bacteria. I don't think that animals need to be eating sterile food, but there's a time and a place that I'm very thankful that we have HPP products out there, because there's a time and a place, like after a GI tract, after a GI anastomosis, where you take a tennis ball out of a lab and you sew their small intestine back together. That's a good time for sterile food, especially if you want to still keep feeding fresh food. So HPP falls under that minimally processed. Processed pet foods are everything in that first category. Oh, we got an amen. Processed pet foods are everything in that first category plus one heat step. So one thermal step, that would be our gently cooked foods that are so incredibly popular now in the market. And ultra processed pet foods are these industrial food creations that we can't make at home because none of us can buy a home extruder. There is no option to buy a home extruder. There's no option to buy lamb meal at the local grocery store. These are ingredients that we don't have access to. And it requires many, many steps, as Rodney just pointed out. So that's baking, smoking, canning, and extrusion is the definition of ultra-processed pet foods. So we see these titles all the time. Like, we know that we as humans are supposed to eat less ultra-processed foods, but the question is, like, what's so bad about them? Like, why are they really bad? And now we have enough science to know. Highly processed foods have denatured proteins. The enzymes and fatty acids have been inactivated because of heat. There's massive nutrient loss to the point that pet foods have to spray. They have to put a top coating back on the food after it comes out of the extruder with the vitamin mineral mix, because the food itself does not have enough nutrients. So we have to put synthetics back on top after the processing. That's how devoid of nutrition it is. And then fats can become oxidized and rancid, and these detrimental chemical reactions occur. I'm going to spend 2 minutes talking about these detrimental chemical reactions, because this is what the industry is not talking about. This cat in the middle was a French chemist and physician, Louis Camille Maillard. He developed Maillard reaction products, that term, because he was the dude that figured out, the scientist that figured out what's going on with pet foods. He, of course, found it for human foods, and the pet food industry does not want any of you to know this. They certainly don't want us researching how many Maillard reaction products are in pet foods. Dr. Maillard found that when you combine carbs, fats, and proteins with heat, and the average bag of kibble has been high heat processed 4 times. So every time you heat a food, this reaction occurs. And the more times you heat a food with a higher heat, the more reaction is there. That when this happens, the end result are these microscopic, tasteless, odorless compounds called advanced glycation end products. I'm just going to call them AGEs. And they occur in very high levels with more processing. Here's the downside and why they so negatively impact our animals' bodies. Every cell of our dog and cat's bodies has a receptor for AGE, and when the receptor and the advanced glycation end product molecule hits the receptor, researchers call it rage, because first there's internal cellular inflammation, then there is, as the AGEs circulate around your dog and cat's bloodstream, then there is immune interaction, ultimately leading to allergies. There's a massive inflammatory response. It leads to tissue injury, early aging, inflammation, and cancer. This, if you put in advanced glycation end products into any search engine, PubMed, there's 15,000 research papers talking about this reaction, and yet the entire pet food industry is silent. The end result of animals eating AGEs is chronic inflammation and tissue injury, and every single disease that we see over and over in the exam room. Every veterinarian in this room, this is what we see all day, every day. Cancer, metabolic disease, kidney, liver, heart disease, degenerative diseases like degenerative myelopathy, and immune-related diseases. That's the end result of advanced glycation end product accumulation. So the research is so overwhelming that AGEs negatively impact the kidney, the liver, eyes, brain and central nervous system, joints, including soft tissues, heart, spleen, pancreatic issues, including pancreatitis and pancreatic cancer. AGEs affect thyroid, adrenal, and prostate, as well as reproductive orders, IBD, IBS, and disrupted microbiomes all have solid research pertaining to AGE interventions and interactions. Cancer, autoimmune disease, and allergies all have solid papers demonstrating AGE implications, as does a disruption of our dog's internal antioxidant system. So it's non-negotiable. Eating ultra-processed foods means you are feeding a very high level of AGEs to your animals on a daily basis. Now, am I trying to fearmonger and say never eat ultra-processed food? No. We all eat some ultra-processed foods. So it's not that you have to avoid all of it. The more ultra-processed foods that you are nourishing your animals with, the more that they are consuming these AGEs. How many? 122 times higher for dogs and 38 times higher for cats than human AGE intake. That is why our animals are chronically ill in one regard. AGEs are not the only issue, but when people say, well, what's really so bad about ultra-processed food? This is a heavy-hitting reason that ultra-processed foods is becoming more prevalent in the terms of the discussion of us understanding what the damage really is. Here's the sad fact, and this is an old stat, which is horrible. This is a 2021 stat. In modernized countries, 50% of human daily calories come from ultra-processed foods, and for pets, 85%. Last month, I heard a new stat that it's now 69% of daily calories for people under 25 in the US come from ultra-processed foods. That also correlates to why 1 in 4 kids are now considered pre-diabetic in the US. Frightening. So what do pet foods do? They either have to admit that they're producing foods that are not amazingly healthy. How are you going to backtrack from that? And they're not going to do that. They have to produce raw foods, which they're not going to do, or they're going to buy raw food companies, and that's exactly what you're seeing. Mars bought Now for $1 billion last year, and this is the beginning of a trend of ultra-processed pet foods trying to cash in on their share of a fresh food market.
All right, so now, after that incredible explanation, it becomes a lot easier when you see these gimmicky marketing terms to be able to sift through them, and that's why in the book, when you guys look, we built you our trusty little guide, our food adulteration chart to make your life a little easier, where obviously you're trying to stay away from red zone, which is the most adulterated, and trying to get yourself into a green zone. Now, we know that many people can't afford all or nothing here. I've had people reach out to me and say, dude, I got a great day. You want me to feed freeze-dried? That's impossible. We get it. But how much would you really need to make a difference? And this is where it comes back to the incredible Dr. Anna Hale-Dorfman and her research. When we sat down with Anna, she said, guys, it doesn't take everything. You can just start with a tablespoon. So 1 tablespoon of something less adulterated into the bowl, they can see under a microscope the effects of homocysteine and methionine, and they can see inflammatory markers drop. But when we put the book together, we also knew that we were dealing with a super, super massive problem. How much do y'all spend on pet food? How many people here spend like, how much?
Salary.
Your entire salary. I get it. How many people are like over $50? Oh, how many people are over $100? Right? Connor, how much do you think people are spending in the United States, brother? Average.
Oh God, per month I have no idea. I'm going to say 201 on surgical vet visits and 254 on average on food.
Jesus, you're good. He's good, right? This is why we brought him from the UK. $23.92 a month. Remember we talked about this one time. Isn't it unbelievable? $23.92 a month is what Americans are currently spending a month on pet food. We knew it, and we knew that it would be a big problem. So when we went to the longevity scientists, we were like, hey man, what happens if people are having a hard time making ends meet? What can we do? Enter the forever food section in the book that you'll see. These were hands down, when we asked the scientists for the most affordable and the best foods that people could mix into their bowls that would make them magical, what would those be? Look at this. This is obvious. There's so many mushroom people in here. How many of y'all feed mushrooms? Right? Come on. Why wouldn't you be feeding? And we know that mushrooms are incredible. And we're not going to go into the logistics of all of them, but what's pretty interesting, if you took a whole bunch of culinary mushrooms or medicinal mushrooms, they have a lot of things in common. And my favorite thing that they have in common, if you take a look at some of these research papers, no matter what species ate mushrooms, culinary or medicinal, they seem to live longer. In fact, we even have it in human research. Here's an American paper with over 15,000 participants, and those that eat mushrooms, they live longer. check out the research that came out of the University of Penn State. Those that consume 18 grams, 2 mushrooms a day, 45% drop in the incidence of cancer. So it seems like a no-brainer to add mushrooms into our guide for the book. Here's another hack. Mushrooms have a shelf life in grocery stores. This is in Canada, the 50% reduced aisle. Man, you can load up on mushrooms for like $2. And what's, aside from that, we also show you hacks in the book how to make your mushrooms better. Chopping up mushrooms, putting them out in the sunlight, jacking up the vitamin D levels in it with that biohack. But how about this one from Dr. William Li, the food scientist? He really wanted you all to know about this, which is why we added it into the book. Would you believe, I kept calling this a STEM, it's actually called the stipe, for you science junkies. The stipe is the #1 thrown thing away for mushrooms. Everybody throws them out. They're gross, nobody likes the texture of them. Pizza restaurants load up dumpsters with the stipe. And according to Dr. William Li, the food scientist, the stipe has double the amount of fiber, double the amount of bioactives, and double the amount of beta-glucans. And it's headed to the garbage. Make friends with your local pizza restaurant, support them on a Friday night, and ask them to bag the stipes for you and don't throw them away. Which brings us to our last topic, and maybe the most important, the environment. 5 minutes. Which is why we had to, oh, you're gonna have fun with this one. Which is why we divided the book into 2 parts for you. Obviously food's important, but the environment's equally more important. We always hear this all the time. Oh, it's just a little bit of chlorine, why do I gotta put a water filter? Oh, it's just a little bit of phthalates. Who cares that I'm feeding my dog those rubber bones, right? How much is too much? How much, according to science, we've already reached that point. We have more people today under the age of 50 with cancer. It's up 80% in the last 3 decades. When you ask scientists why this is happening, sure, we know that we have better diagnostic techniques, but that's not it. According to scientists, it's the environment and the microbiome that's constantly changing. And Dr. Becker says this all the time. Buy a filter, or your pets at home are the filter. According to scientists, our animals today are so overburdened with cosmetic products. Dr. Becker is going to tell you about all the things that our pets are burdened with, but according to scientists, they are the sentinel beings. They are the filters of your home, involuntary. Like, whether you like it or not, they spend the most time at home, and they're at home right now accumulating indoor air pollution. And only 10% of the planet has clean air. We just got back from New York, where it's absolutely terrible. Now, in this study that we referenced, where the scientists were talking about indoor particulate matter, this is something that you can't see that's a massive problem right now in your homes. Particulate matter, which gets absorbed through the skin of your pets, and it changes epigenetically the muscle of your pet. Your dog or cat's own immune system starts attacking itself. Your pets start looking like this. You think you got a protein problem. You go running to buy chicken, you drop beef, you go buy moose. You try to find any protein source to solve the problem, when the whole time it's indoor particulate matter. And I get told by people all the time, oh, I can see this. This isn't really big of a problem. No, my friends, you can't see it. These are some of the smallest objects in the world. The particulate matter that we're talking about that our pets are having problem with are 10 to 2.5 microns in size.
And our animals are trapped in the house all day. Our dogs can go outside and off gas. Some of you may walk your cats, but we don't, well-loved cats, we don't let them out. It's too much of a risk, obviously. So our kitties are actually the most toxic animals in the home. They're naked, they're fuzzy, they groom themselves. They have the highest level of environmental contaminants. And we know that this environmental chemical stress that is plaguing our pet populations is also powerfully contributing to disease. So the Dog Aging Project actually did a study just recently, like 2 months ago. They put these silicone tags on collars, on dogs' collars, and just had them wear around the house for 5 days. And the levels of environmental chemicals that they got off these dogs, flame retardants, organophosphates, PFAS, which are forever chemicals, PCBs, pesticides, phthalates, and personal care products were off the flipping charts after just 5 days. Now, kids in the home, you and I are in the same homes, we shower, we wear protective clothing, our animals don't. So they literally are swiffering up everything in our homes, and then it's being internalized, affecting organ function, endocrine dysfunction, immune function, and overall health and well-being. So when we think about potential risks in the home, the whole back half of the book are hacks for you to replace potentially toxic products in and around your home with non-toxic options. And we give you recipes for almost everything. But what I want you to be thinking about for your kitchen, gas stoves off-gassing, hence the need for air filtration, unfiltered water, cleaning products, and cooking on non-stick Teflon pans. Off-gassing is a big problem that is absolutely an environmental air quality issue for pets. In the bedroom, we have radon, scented candles, fabric softeners, mothballs, and things like Febreze. I'm not bashing that brand, but those chemicals you're spraying on your dog beds or on your couch, no bueno for you and your family in terms of airborne particulate matter. From the living room, we have wood smoke, off-gassing, any type of carpet that has a scotch guard or stain guard, known endocrine disruptors contributing to thyroid, adrenal problems, flame retardants that are sprayed on fabrics, upholstery, tobacco smoke, also secondhand environmental particulate matter risk. And then in the bathroom, and actually a lot, black mold, big issues in many, many homes, aerosolized cosmetics, toilet bowl cleaners, and air fresheners. These are all common sources of airborne contaminants in our homes that our pets can't escape from and are causing significant harm. So when we think about
what's happening with our pets, look at how burdened they are today. This is the most recent data that's been published. I'm not going to go through all of them. If you want to screen capture it, it's pretty gnarly. But this is the current state of our pets today. Now, that's why, I know you're all taking pictures here. I know I'm blowing through my time. It's the pictures, it's people's fault. The cameras. Okay, so that's why in the back of the book, it was very important to us to show you how to create a DIY, very effective air purification system in the house, this DIY air filter. According to the CDC here in America and the University of California, Davis, these are 85% effective. In fact, they outperform $850 units, and you can make it for less than 30 bucks. Less than $20 for the box fan, $10 for the MERV 13 filter. You got $100, you can put one on each of the floors to protect your pets. Also, there are food categories, but in lieu of time, APH's vegetables that we had in the first book, we showed you that these incredible vegetables detox aflatoxins from your pets. But in 2022, after our first book was written, the professors at the University of Delaware discovered that APH's vegetables, oh, by the way, can detox air pollution. So acrolein and things that have particulate matter, forest fires, tobacco, cars that are zooming by, adding this into the food will help haul it out and detox it from the body. And how much do you need of these products? You don't need a lot of these type of plants. According to the researchers, for you, it's around 1 cup and 1/3. But for your pets, it's like half a cup for a dog and only 1.5 teaspoon for cats.
Beautiful. So those are the indoor environmental chemical stressors that we need to be thinking about. For outside, it gets bad if we're talking about chemicals we're putting on our grass, homes, and lawns. 76% of dogs had residues in their urine following home lawn chemical application. If you have a dandelion-free yard, that is a massive chemical risk for you and your kids. It just is, and there's no two ways around it. In fact, those little stickers that they put that say, stay off the grass, it's been treated for 3 days, that is a lie from the pit of the mouth of the devil. 8 days after those applications, we are picking up urine residues 14 times higher than normal of those pesticides being metabolized inside of a dog's body. And when professional lawn companies come and spray, there's a 70% increase in the incidence of lymphoma, the #1 type of cancer that dogs get. And even if you have a green, beautiful, chemical-free lawn that's full of dandelions and organic, if your neighbors are spraying, there's a 50-foot blowover, which means chemicals coming your way anyway. So my recommendation is, get your sprinkler out and water, after your neighbor sprays, water those chemicals that are blowing over down past the point that when your dogs and your kids are out there wandering around, that it's not going to be contaminated on their feet. We go over this entire list of stuff and tips and tricks and things you can do, not to freak you out, but to empower you to recognize, ooh, didn't think about that, go home and make a change. We want to give you ideas and inspirations so we can be the best that we can be. And the reason that we're giving you, running through these tips and tricks, is because we never want to have to say, if I only knew then what I know now. We want to be able to come together as a community, and the more that we know, the better we can do, because we're sharing information and knowledge that brings us together in a way that allows us to minimize regrets.
I've been doing this for almost 15 years. Karen, like 200. And I'll tell you this. When we used to travel, it was impossible to fill a room with 2.0 pet parents, man. People would have to put out like handwritten letters to try to get people from all over the world to bound together to support the speakers that you see here today. I am so proud of all of you, us, the 2.0 pet parents, selling out 5 straight events all across the US. That's how many of you want to learn. We love you. We appreciate you. Shout out to the Feed Real team, all the speakers today, all of you guys. Thank you. We love you. And thank you for being our final stop.